It's great to have three-time Major League Baseball All-Star Daniel Murphy with us here on Sports Spectrum. Welcome back to the show, buddy.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to
nice
see you.
to be down here in Naples, my wife.
I know, it's beautiful down here. I wish we could do all of our Sports Spectrum interviews in Naples, Florida. Unfortunately, that's not the case, but it's wonderful to see you. I just thought when I ran into you and I knew you were going to be at this conference, I said, well, this was an interesting 2023 for Daniel Murphy, who we thought was retired and done with baseball, and all of a sudden I saw your name pop up in the Atlantic League, and then suddenly signing a contract with the Angels. Let's go through this year a little bit. When did you start to see in 2023 in the beginning that God might have been directing you back to play baseball a little bit?
I would say that this adventure started in the middle of October, kind of around postseason last year, 2022.
Yep.
And I can say that before this adventure started, I had almost zero inclination of ever playing again.
You thought, I'm retired. I'm done.
I say almost zero because I never want to say never, but
Sure.
I had no inclination of ever playing. I didn't think I'd ever play again.
Yeah.
And I started kind of getting down the YouTube rabbit hole and was reintroduced to like the baseball swing, because there are quite a few people in the industry who are, well, the baseball swing, if you do it well, is very valuable, so people are trying to sort it. Fair play to you.
Okay.
And I got a chance to see a couple movements that I thought were good and could be productive, but then at the same time, individuals were saying like, we cracked the code. And that's not to say that I felt like I had cracked the code. It's just the positions I saw these coaches getting into and then their players, those didn't look like positions that would be able to be optimally productive at the big league level by my eye. Now, I could be wrong,
Sure.
but that's just what my eye said. So I go, all right, these fellas said they've cracked the code. It doesn't appear so to me. Has anybody? Let me go. I get down this swing kind of YouTube rabbit hole, and I run across a gentleman named Jamie Cevallos, and he calls himself the swing mechanic. He's worked with Ben Zobrist a bit, and I think Raul Ibanez, and he has so far been the best swing technician that I've seen. Now, hitting is much, much more than the swing, but 'tis nice to have a sharp sword.
Yeah.
You know what I
would
mean?
imagine.
And so what Jamie had done and introduced me to was basically something similar to what I did when I first retired after 2020.
Yeah.
Was I kind of went through the Revolutionary War and just was able to learn a lot about our U.S. history, and it rocked my world. And it made me extremely grateful, and I think also helped kind of cultivate some of these skills from audiobooks and going back in time and trying to extract as much of the meat as I could from there. And then, well, Jamie started talking about Babe Ruth and Ted Williams and Willie Mays and how did these guys develop their skills? And they developed them on the sandlots, unsupervised by parents, only being pushed by their peers and the scoreboard.
Right.
That's how they learned baseball.
That's right.
And with that, their movements are, by my eye, as I've researched it, they get in different positions and move differently than I did. I think more optimal. Another one I would say as well, too, that's been on this adventure is I had a microfracture surgery. Now, people get hurt.
Sure.
And it could be for all number of reasons, but I thought it was a bit confusing that because I swung a stick for 35 years or 30 years, I broke a joint. Yeah. It doesn't seem right to me. I could be wrong, but it doesn't seem right. And then our pitchers seem to break at a rate that's higher than the guys that played at the turn of the century, maybe through the 50s and 60s. Now, we throw harder. It seems to be maybe the understanding that with that velocity comes, you're going to break. I don't necessarily think that needs to be so. And I could be wrong. And there may not be as much velocity, but also availability has some sort of say in your baseball career.
Very much so.
And then I'm the bench coach for the 9U Blue Claws for my son's team.
Okay.
And watching children move, who, if given a heavy enough bat, my 5-year-old, because I gave him a 35-inch, 35-ounce Lou Gehrig replica to hit with, he likes swords. It's just a bigger sword. He is able to achieve the same exact positions that Babe Ruth, who I have as the greatest hitter of all time, and Ted Williams.
Wow.
Same positions.
At 9 years old?
He's 5.
5 years old?
Yes. But I think of it this way, okay, if my sons get in the same positions that I would say, by my measurement, the most elite hitters of all time get into, but I didn't, what happened? What's the disconnect? And I thought, it appears that children, if not specifically coached specific positions, but just allowed to play and freely express themselves, if given a heavy enough bat with their peers and play long enough, achieve different positions than I did in the modern game. And they didn't break the way I broke. So I'm like, this is very interesting, this thesis I have. There are places that you can go to test this out. And thus we get into, all right.
The Atlantic League.
Yeah. And so what kind of happened, I would say, fundamentally, when I decided to go was I have a shot clock that has been cultivated over the number of years that I've had at bats. And even more cultivated at the professional and major league level, because it just doesn't get any sharper than that. And the reason I stopped in 2020 was, by my eye, my shot clock says, you have no time to make good decisions. Ted Williams asked Roger Hornsby, what's it take to be a great hitter? He said, get a good ball to hit. I was not choosing good balls. And I would have to cheat and hope that I got a good ball to be productive in 2020.
Right.
And so at that point I thought, I'm unwilling to do the things necessary to get better, and I don't think they'll even work, because I think I needed a swing change, and I had done one of those. And all the skills that I had at my disposal at the time, I was like, whatever I do to my swing, it's not gonna give me the shot clock. It's not gonna give me the time I need to make good decisions. So I was watching a show one time and it said, if you don't like the game, flip over the table. So I stopped playing.
And that was it.
That was it.
And then you start coming back, though. So, like, the idea of coming back
Yes.
stems from the sort of craft of finding the swing again and testing this out. And you go to Long Island. Did you call the Ducks and say, hey, this is Daniel Murphy. I'm thinking about coming back? Or how does this all take place?
Fair. Reasonable question. So what ended up happening is, once I decided to play, and I was not... I should have more properly informed my wife. Like, she had an inclination, because I was moving every single day. I was just grabbing bats and balls all the time, and just, I would say I was playing like a child plays at extended daycare, unsupervised. That's what I've been doing for the last year, like unsupervised free play, trying to create play, and just being curious about baseball and the swing. And so it got to the point that I knew my shot clock was saying, I don't know where in the professional baseball industry I can play, but I'm going fast enough to play somewhere, fast enough to get fired by somebody.
Right.
So I tried to get a gig in spring. I'll take a step back. Once I decided, or I felt that I was going at least fast enough to get at bats, that at that point it became, if I choose not to do this, it will be more out of fear than anything else. I was like, okay, well, and then, we have the song that we're singing, Don't Get Shy on Me Now, There's a Lion Inside of You. I was listening to that song, almost
Gratitude.
weeping. Yes. So the gratitude, baseball has afforded me and my family so much. And a lot of that has to do with just the fact that I happen to be born 100 years later than someone. Because there are guys at the turn of the century who were more productive than me. But we weren't as affluent as a society, so they don't get to go down to Naples in the middle of the off season and hang out on the beach because they're a good baseball player.
Right.
But they seem to let me do that.
Yeah.
So it made me very, very grateful as I read Lawrence Ritter's book, The Glory of Their Times, when he talked to these guys from the dead ball era.
Great book.
It's wonderful. I say read it. I listened to it about 8 times.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, all right, I think I'm going fast enough for a gig. That doesn't mean anything. The industry has to decide whether or not I'm going fast enough for a gig.
Sure.
So I try to get a job in spring training, and it was apparent that the industry believed me when I said I was done after 2020. The affiliated industry. No one was interested in giving me a job in spring training. Completely reasonable. So then I go, well, where would I go next if I still want to play? And I did. It would be Long Island. And good fortune that the Long Island skipper is Wally Backman.
Of course.
And so I played for Wally, and with the Mets, and know him fairly well. And so he was all for it. He's like, come on up. Thank you. I'll use your sandlot. And so I went up and started playing and trying to implement movements like I feel like my children do, and all these fellas did kind of at the turn of the century. Like, I tried to hit like Mel Ott. I'd mess around, try to hit like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, and was there for 2 months and didn't observe anything to deter me from my thesis, which was, if I just gave my son a bat and didn't give him any instruction and just said go and hit, he would get as good as he wanted to at hitting, depending on how many balls he hit, and I don't think he would break in the same way that I broke. Now, that doesn't mean I'm right. It's just that's my thesis.
Yeah, it's a thesis.
The part about whether or not breaking joints remains to be seen. But as far as the way that I think the individuals moved before us, and I would say I vastly underestimated how well Ted Williams moved. I just underestimated. I just thought, it's as long ago they weren't throwing hard enough. I would never say he wouldn't be productive now, but it's a different game. Velocity's up. And then I start looking and seeing, okay, it does appear that there are specific positions that you can get into to optimize production. And a perfect example is Ken Griffey Jr. So I think Griffey took us back in time because you'd be hard-pressed to find a modern player who moves like Jr. That's not reasonable?
I think that's very reasonable.
Okay,
yeah.
well, and then Griffey is a second generation, Junior's a second generation sandlotter.
Right.
All right, so his father played, and you can see that Junior grew up with heavier bats. I found that in my own coaching of my children, as opposed to giving them specific positions to get into with their hands, their feet, their head, anything, I try to give them tasks to accomplish, easier to do. I say, hit it as far as you can. You hit a ball really far, you had to do something right. Now, if it's gone really far, let's get more accurate.
Right.
And then I thought, how do you get more accurate? Hit more balls. Right. That's been my experience. So in working and observing kids, I would say, myself included, I have a tendency to be impatient with them when they're not accurate. So in order to make them more accurate, we may have a tendency to shorten their punch. So I think they're built in with a haymaker. They're given one.
Yeah.
Just not accurate. Okay, I wouldn't say throw a jab or a cross, even though the game will dictate that that's called for at times. Get more accurate with your haymaker. Throw more haymakers, like Mike Tyson.
Right. Going to have more knockouts.
Well, yeah, there you go. And it seems I've found that children, when we practice, they beg to scrimmage. They love the pitcher batter.
They want to play.
Dance.
They want to play.
Play.
Yeah.
Play. And then play in every sense of the term.
And practice is part of there's practice built in when you're playing like that.
Yes, when
that's
you can scrimmage.
Right.
But also at the same time we do drill work, their eyes glaze over.
Right.
We do drill work in the Army. And I'm not saying there's not a place for it, but it's not fully play. And there, I think, can be some creativity can be limited if there are always adults and coaches around coaching.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you just, and so.
Wow.
That was.
So you hit 331 in the Atlantic League, and suddenly the Angels call. So you're going from Long Island, and in June you're signing a contract with the Angels. Again, it sounds like just to see this theory that you have, this thesis. Let's prove it at a pretty high level at AAA, and maybe you get a call to the big leagues. Who knows? And you do well. You hit 295 in 38 games in AAA. So take us to the Angels experience. And eventually you decide to retire again in August. So what's going on there between June and August that caused you to play well? I don't know if you even got a chance to get to the big leagues or if you thought one was coming and you just said, okay, let's not go there. Or you just said, okay, I've accomplished what I want to accomplish. I'm done. Like, tell that story.
Yes. So my wife kind of asked me, I would say I'm going to work backwards a little bit and hopefully I can answer that question. My wife asked me, like, what's a perfect ending? Because I wanted to pick, and by game, I meant a game to play as far as, I wanted to pick a game on this adventure that I could walk away from. Because my family may need me. So the two rules, as she asked me, what's a perfect ending is, I'll keep coming to the ballpark if I'm enjoying my baseball and my family's doing okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I can't enjoy my baseball if my family isn't doing it. So they were one and the same. And I didn't feel like I felt like if the goal was to get to the big leagues, that's not a game I could win. Because I might not make it. The big leagues is hard. It's hard to get there. And when I got to AAA, I found out very quick, these guys are fast and strong. They're monsters. They're like creatures.
Yeah.
And they really are.
And they're a lot younger than you.
And I have experience, but they move so fast.
Yes.
And so when I got to the Angels, and thank you for saying I was productive, I was still fairly accurate. but I wasn't very powerful.
Sure. Well, 295 is pretty good.
It's accurate.
If you hit 295 for a career, right, that's accurate.
Cheers. Thank you. So the nice thing about the Pacific Coast League is there's a lot of hits out there if you're accurate, because it's at altitude, the ground is hard. But I didn't play in the big leagues because I wasn't productive enough. And I wouldn't say I lost my train of thought. I'm trying to think about how to answer the question. I'm going on off a bit of a tangent here.
Well, it was the moment you decided this was the end, because you said you wanted to have a perfect ending, and Tori was like, "What's the perfect ending for you?" And somewhere along the lines, there was an ending for you. You decided, "Okay, I'm done."
Yeah. What happened is, I would say, as school started, just the strain on our family. That's a 2-person operation.
Yes. You have 4 kids. Let's put it out there. And they're how old again?
We go 9, 7, just 6, and 1 year old,
and a baby.
And a baby, basically doing this.
Yeah.
And so, as far as that went, oh golly, I keep losing my train of thought.
No, it's what's your end goal in terms of, you said the kids going back to school, and why you knew that this was the end.
And so with the game that I picked of making sure that my family was okay, well, I could just walk away. And I also at the same time knew I wasn't productive enough to feel aggrieved that I didn't get a call.
Yeah.
Now, perhaps another week or 2, but I would have had to do something I hadn't done, which is be powerful. And I was unable to do that the whole time. I couldn't hit a double. So I think of baseball offense as I need to be able to touch second base from home plate. So I either need to hit singles and steal, which is a young man's game. I don't do that. Or I need to hit doubles. And the way you hit doubles is you miss the infielders. I couldn't miss the infielders enough.
And you hit a lot of doubles in your days with the Mets and the Nationals.
Well, that's why they kept giving me at bats, hopefully.
Yeah.
It wasn't my defense that they gave me at bats for. And as we just went through this, I kept experimenting. I would bounce these ideas off of my teammates and just kind of, because as I started seeing the way that like Ruth and Willie Mays moved, all these experiences started coming back to me of like, man, when I was my most productive, I was getting into very similar positions, not like closer than I was when I was less productive. And I had just enough tools to where I could manufacture those specific positions that my children get into. So I just kept trying to do it as long as I could. And I would play all sorts of games. So as we started this, I'll go back to somewhat at the beginning. I've tried to turn myself into a southpaw. Because I thought, if I go do this adventure after being on the couch for 2 years and try to play, I have to find some shortcuts to catch up in some capacity. And so I go, well, I said, if I can be more accurate with my left hand, that'll help. And then I also watched, Babe Ruth, through 30 scoreless innings in the World Series with his left hand. Yeah. And then if you ask him for an autograph, he'll sign it with his
right hand.
His right hand.
Huh.
Oh, fair play. Yeah.
Okay.
They're ambidextrous. So is Lou Gehrig. He wrote right-handed through left-handed. Stan Musial and Griffey and Bonds. And it seemed to me this seems to be a marked inefficiency here. Because I'll play ping pong with my son. He's a righty. And then he sticks the pad on his left hand, and he sorts it very quickly. And I'd start hitting right-handed.
Right.
And then it kind of opened up a new part of my brain, creatively, I think. And I've kind of explained it this way. When you have some semblance of a roadmap, you want to get to the big leagues, here's the roadmap. You know what I mean? Meaning to traverse this. That means you have a roadmap, which is good. But how much does it limit creative play? And is it the best roadmap? Now, maybe it is.
It's a system roadmap for sure.
I kind of, I wouldn't say creatively, but just like, is there another way? To try to be as productive as possible.
So is there, now that you've gone through this?
I can only answer for myself.
Yeah.
Should I train for a baseball season and get prepared for it, I would do it differently than I did when I played from, until 2020.
You would?
Yes.
Okay.
I would probably touch less weights. Not to say there's not a place for strength. I would say maybe I would touch much more baseballs and bats in the off season. Well, Gehrig and Ruth and those guys, they went and barnstormed after the end of the.
Yes.
And so how many pitcher-batter matchups did they get? Those dances. The more you dance, the better you get at it. And so that's what I would do. I would play a lot more baseball. I would touch a lot more balls and bats.
Where did you learn not to play a lot of baseball and touch a lot of balls and bats in the off season? Was that just something that was kind of indoctrinated into you as you started to, develop into your early career, maybe with the Mets?
Yeah, I would say early on, when you don't have as much responsibility with your family, I would just go to the cage and hit all the time. And then But also with the understanding that the rhythm of my off season personally would be take some time off to rest and relax, get into the weight room and move around and run, and then couple that with hitting and throwing and ground balls.
Yeah.
I would probably not take the time off from touching baseballs and bats. I would just continue to hit and throw.
Yeah.
And not to say I wouldn't look to add strength and power, but I wouldn't put it at the forefront as much as I did when I played. And I would say, I want to bounce this off you. Tell me what you think, because I have different definitions of strength and power.
Okay.
So I think power is the ability to move a lot of something. You know what I mean? Move a lot of weight, hit a ball a long way. I think of strength as the ability to maintain position in whatever movement you're doing.
Right.
So if I stand up and I say, hey, stand in a position you could stay in for a month, and you go, okay, this is it, I feel comfortable. That you would be strong in that position.
Right. Yeah,
well,
sure.
If I want to be strong at hitting, I think I would get stronger at hitting if I hit more and train myself to maintain position, maybe even with a heavy bat, to hit the ball a long way. And so now I'm a strong hitter. I may not be as powerful necessarily as far as even weight room strength, but I'm becoming a stronger hitter. Because you just look at Ted Williams, like Ted said he wanted to be the greatest hitter of all time. Well, you don't have to listen to him. Just watch what he did. All he did was touch bats. That's all he did. No, I'm not saying I want to be Ted. It comes at a cost.
Sure.
And he got married a couple times, and he seemed a prickly creature sometimes, but he could wallop, baby.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And those guys, they just played baseball all the time.
Let me ask you one more question regarding this past year, and it goes deeper into the spirituality, into the faith aspect of what this show can often be about. What did you learn from God in making these decisions this year to kind of step out? Sounds like stepping out of a comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, I like being at home.
Yeah,
a lot.
That's what God taught you?
Well, no, I knew that, man. He didn't have to tell me
You
that.
didn't know that. What did God teach you?
Gratitude. It's just
That song.
It's what I kept coming back to. Like, so grateful. I listened to Hans Lobert, who's on that book, The Glory of Their Times. And Hans was the same player I was, just as productive. We're the same players. He just born 100 years earlier. And Hans, at the end of his life, he had lost his wife. He had just gotten hit by a car. He was living in a crummy apartment, and he didn't even have enough money for a TV to watch baseball, of which he loved still.
Wow.
And so I think, what did I do to end up here, even though we're the same player, the same exact player? And then he says something at the end of the interview. He goes, the biggest kick I get is by helping out a youngster. No, baseball's been real good to me. I'm going to be real good to it. I was like, and he meant it. It like broke me. I was in the Radisson on that one as well too. But just to hear someone say, like, I may be down on my luck right now, but like this game, I have lots to be grateful for. And that's the way I felt the whole time. Grateful to show up to the ballpark. It was quite strange to go out and stretch. It hurt. I was an old man, busted knees, but was able to just go out there and be extremely grateful. And I think I was able to learn a bit of that from like the American Revolution, because what we have here is divine here in the States. And I was able to take some of that gratitude, and I fast forwarded about 130 years. And then I also was able at the same time to just learn the history of our game. And baseball is foundational to the U.S. Like, this is our game. And it's not the most popular one now. That's fair. Football can have it. But you ain't been around as long. And it's in our bloodstream.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more American than a heavyweight bout 60 feet away and then all hell breaking loose after the ball gets hit.
Yeah.
It was too fast for the English. They didn't know what to do with it.
Wow. There's so many beautiful, not parallels, I guess, but like that, just that word gratitude. It's gratitude for the game of baseball, gratitude for the life God has given you, gratitude for when you were born. Like, I love, that book with Lawrence Ritter and just the guys that he highlights, and as you listen to it, you get teary-eyed as you're describing, and just gratitude that you were able to play this game and be successful and play it at a high level for so many years, but also just kind of gratitude for God to like choose you. Like, who are you, Daniel Murphy, right? And God chose you to have this opportunity.
And that's how I feel, because there are so many prerequisites, as I learned, that were outside of my control, that I had no control over. I have such a loving mom and dad. I didn't pick that.
Right.
They could have picked anyone. They picked me. They stuck around. They didn't have to. I have a wife that, as I saw again over this year, who just will move heaven and earth for the betterment of our family and me. And yeah, I picked her, but like that's a lot of good fortune right there. I ain't the best picker necessarily.
And she chose you too, though.
Fair play to that.
Let's be honest, right?
But you start seeing these prerequisites that were kind of outside of my control that I just had the good fortune of benefiting from. So, okay, and I like mixing it up with the fellas again. I like being in there. I like talking baseball. I like offense. I like talking about getting ready and a plan and approach, and yeah, that part really gets me going.
Well, it sounds like you got coaching in your future, and I know you don't want to necessarily leave the area of Jacksonville, which is just home for you, but there's just a lot there. I feel like you're almost like this. You just have so much information. Like you and I just started talking before we hit record, and you're like, Babe Ruth is, he's the number one player of all time for me. And I said, all right, now we're going down this trail that I love to not debate necessarily, but just to kind of who's your favorite of all time or who's the greatest of all time. And a lot of people watched Shohei the last few years and said, this guy is basically doing what Babe Ruth did at different levels and different times. So you have a lot of information and a lot of, I feel like, wisdom and just experience, and like you say, want to help that young fella, because I was given so much as a baseball player. Does that ring true? Like
it
to
does.
Be a coach someday, or to even just serve somewhere?
Yes,
with the game of baseball.
Because it makes me think back to the great teammates that I had that I didn't get to pick. Like David Wright was there for me, and I got to learn from him, and had Howard Johnson as a hitting coach, and then to be able to go and hopefully have enough wisdom to see, does this individual want the information I have? Because that's a question I try to ask. I don't want to just be right. I want to make sure the individual wants the information.
Sure.
And then for them to be willing to take it and learn off of kind of the lashes of my back. I love giving. What you want to talk about? I've been beat up, man. I've been punched a lot.
Yeah.
I threw a couple punches myself, but I take them on the kisser all the time. What you want to talk about?
Yeah.
And that's the part that's so enjoyable, because I like market inefficiencies. If I feel like I see a market inefficiency, then I'll just try to exploit it as best I can, if that's an area that I enjoy. And one of the market inefficiencies, I think that, I wouldn't say inefficiencies, but one of the things that helped me is that I found that, I heard this, I think if you outwork your peers, and I'm not saying I did, I just like to hit a lot. It never felt like work to me. Hitting a baseball never felt like work. But if you work 10% more than your peers, it's not a linear return. Like the return is exponential. That.
Yeah.
And so I start looking now, and I see the way the old guys move. I see the way that I broke, and I think, is there a market inefficiency here? Because then I watch the game at the postseason, and it seems to me that we have the modern hitter, not all of them, but they have a hole at the top of the wickets for the straight fast one, the fastball with the four-seamer.
Sure.
And then about the time that the lads start cheating to that, which is what I had to do in 2020, they throw you a curve that looks straight for a long time because the pitchers are really good, and it's not a straight, it's a curve, and it's gone, and you have to go too early.
Yeah.
And so the postseason is full of, it has a lot of strikeouts. But we want more contact in October, because sometimes when the scoreboard says I got to push this thing forward. And so I don't buy that the pitchers should be as far necessarily ahead of the hitters. Like that's pitchers are ahead, or they can go to the lab and they can create new pitches and tunnel and stuff. And nobody throws the fadeaway anymore. That's a screwball.
Yeah.
And nobody throws that.
Nobody.
Well, they're in the pitch lab. Why don't you learn that one? So I'm not necessarily of the belief that we should be so far behind.
Interesting. Do you think 2015 in the playoffs is still, it's obviously on paper, stat-wise, the hottest you've probably ever been in a short period of time. Is it the hottest you've ever felt in a short period of time? Because stats can be deceiving. You can say, I hit 400 or whatever. I hit 8 homers in 7 games or whatever the number was. And, MVP and all that, and obviously the Mets in the World Series. But you've had some really good seasons before that. You had great seasons certainly after that. Your all-star seasons all came in Washington. What's the most comfortable you've ever felt at the plate?
I would say It would be, I wouldn't say I was the most comfortable in 15, because as I did it more, I kind of became more comfortable in DC over maybe the long season. But as far as like production and doing what I wanted type, yes, that's the stretch. And the way I would explain it is that when my eyes said yes, my bat for some reason, my eyes were saying yes to good balls.
Yeah.
Praise Jesus.
But even some bad balls. I went back and watched some of those pitches that you hit. Not bad balls necessarily, but
not
hard
optimal
pitches.
Balls.
Yeah,
Not
and you're
optimal
knocking them out of
balls.
the park.
Well, when my eyes said yes, it seemed for that stretch of time I was very accurate and powerful. And
right.
I really, when I came home one time, I say to the hotel after hitting a home run, I don't know if it was like the fourth one, and Tori looks at me and she's like, "What in the world?" And I go, I don't know. I can't explain. I don't even want to touch it. You know what I mean? Because I'm afraid I'm just going to spook it.
Right.
And maybe I did in the World Series because I didn't play as well as I would have preferred.
Sure.
But that stretch right there, the best way I can describe is when my eyes said yes, I was coming through accurately and powerfully at the time.
Yeah.
And the more times you do that now belongs to me. Now, that's not to say I can do it. That's just to say that's mine. Yep. And I can recall on that whenever I want. That's not to say I'll replicate it. But if I'm walking down the street at midnight, picking a curveball up off the dirt off of Jake Arrieta is something that belongs to me. Yep. And hitting it out of the ballpark. And I can recall that anytime I want.
I believe that's the home run I described to you that I saw in person in Game 2 of the NLCS in 2015 at Citi Field when that place went absolutely bonkers.
And then you can play visual games as well, too. So, like, what's the definition of a rep? Like, do I need to be holding a bat to get a rep? Or can I pull one right out of my brain? Can I picture the lad in the pitcher's box throwing me a straight fast one? I want it right here. Because the pitchers get to go first. So there is some, but they're still on defense, and their weapon is smaller, and there's only so many places they can go. They have to hit the wickets if I choose good balls. So it kind of just boils down to a physics test. You know what I mean? That's why I don't believe necessarily that the velocity should be so overwhelming. Not to say it's not more difficult. They're throwing much harder now on a much broader scale.
Yeah.
But I go back to if I'm strong enough to maintain position hitting, then I would say, but it's my belief in theory, I can start swinging whenever I want. I can start swinging for your pitched ball tomorrow, today. Yeah. And if I don't like the ball, I can take it. And if it is a ball I like, I'll just continue my swing and finish it, if I'm strong enough to maintain position. So you may throw harder, but I can start whenever I want.
Right. You control it.
In some capacity.
Yeah.
Now, what the pitcher, I think, gives up by having to hit a smaller space, the strike zone, they don't get to turn as much. They don't get to accelerate as fastly and as out of control as I should be able to, because I don't have to hit the wickets. I just need to hit the space. If we played cricket, we could just go full 360 circles and rotate like a figure skater going for the gold.
Right.
I happen to be holding on to a mallet. So I have a larger weapon. I get to act last. And I think that I'm afforded because I don't have to be as accurate in a smaller space, and by that I mean the offensive player, to come unglued a bit more.
That's so good. Well, let me close with this. You mentioned the 15 World Series, and it just reminds me of some of the messages we've heard at this conference. You are so on fire, right? In the DS against the Dodgers, the LCS against the Cubs, NLCS MVP, and then you said you didn't play well in the World Series. And, the Royals ended up coming out on top. And it's a good reminder, I think, as we close, that if you did put your identity in baseball, you wouldn't have been able to move on and say, okay, the highest highs and the lowest lows all took place within a 2-week period here. Or not lowest of lows, but you know what I mean, losing a World Series. Talk about how you've been able to maintain that identity in something more sustainable in Christ than just the game of baseball, as much as you love baseball.
Yes. And I would say that I had the good fortune of being on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and then also when I tried to tackle a ground ball in Game 4 of the World Series, the next day's newspaper in the Post, I think, said, "Damn, Daniel."
Yeah.
And so I actually grabbed both of those. I had them sent to me, our PR director, Jay Horowitz, and I was invited to speak that off season, and I just took them both with me. And I was like, Jesus loved me the same in both of these moments.
Wow.
And then I would say, furthermore, the World Series, I can say that I wasn't as present as I could have been. and that was my choice. And what ended up, I would say, happening is that I was a bit fatigued, no more than anyone else, but also at the same time, since I had had the good fortune of being, I was a free agent that year. And
Yeah.
like, I want multiple years.
Yes.
And that was something I was aiming at that I didn't realize had as much of a grip on me as it was as much of a incentive moving forward. And so when I get to the World Series, I wasn't as present as I should have been. I was trying to be at the World Series and a free agent in the offseason. And I got exactly what someone gets when there's only one baseball game in the major leagues going on.
Yep.
When you're trying to be in two places at once. You get your teeth kicked in.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have known that unless I would have been in two places at once. So it's not that I didn't learn anything. I would have preferred to catch those baseballs and win that world championship. What better place is there in the world than to win a World Series in New York? That's where baseball started.
Of course.
But I also was able to learn a lot about myself and what incentivizes me that I didn't know until you do it.
Yeah, that's great. We could talk all day with Daniel Murphy. And the reason I'm stopping our conversation is because we're going to get yelled at in 8 minutes if we don't get to where we got to get to at this conference. But, man, we're going to have you back on again and talk about, Babe Ruth and Barry Bonds and where these guys align. I'll have to text you. Maybe we'll get some numbers and put them in the show notes or something so people can hear Daniel Murphy's all-time hitter rankings. But, hey, thanks, man. Thanks for stopping by and coming back on the show.
Express myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
This is awesome, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.